Hey, welcome into a Bubbles and Blocks. Excuse me. Let me start over here. Welcome into Unemployed with Mike Schaefer. It is a Building Blocks Thursday, which is brought to you by Bubbles and Blocks Child Development Center. This is an important thing to know that Bubbles and Blocks can help out with. They can help your child get better at reading than apparently I am as they help your child and all of your child care needs. With 3 convenient locations across the capital city, Bubbles and Blocks is well suited to handle your childcare needs. One of the great things about Bubbles and Blocks is many of the teachers have a wealth of experience. They've dealt with all kinds of situations and can help tailor the experience your child might need to get the most out of their time each day. Be it hands-on learning, arts and crafts, or simply adjusting to behavioral norms, an experienced teacher can make a huge difference and can also reinforce and help prepare your child for the world around them. Plus, much like recruits value stability, so do parents, so does Bubbles and Blocks, where its management team has been in place since 2019, and with some of them having even started with the daycare when it opened in 2013. Spots are open at all 3 centers. Get your child enrolled today. Give them a call at 402 328 0404 or shoot an email to info@bubblesandblocks.com. All right. It is a Building Blocks Thursday. That means Tim Verghese. It is also the unofficial, or I guess you could call it the soft opening of the 2026 spring ball for Nebraska football. Tim was locked in on the coverage today. We had Matt Rhule speak. I believe Dana Holgerson, Rob Arch. Anybody else get up and stand in front of the Nebraska media firing squad?
Yeah, they had Justin Evans and Andrew Marshall. So
okay. Look at that. Look at that. So, Tim, there's some stuff that we're going to get into, and we'll actually start with this. We have a good question from the YouTube here. I'm going to flash it up onto the screen. We have Michael Anderson asking. First of all, he says love the show, which we appreciate, but then asking, do you all think there is any correlation to Nebraska's struggles in the Big Ten and them not recruiting in Big Ten country? And so I wanted to kind of throw that at you, Tim, because I know like different Nebraska staffs have had sort of a different viewpoint on how much time and how much attention they've wanted to put into the Big Ten footprint. This staff has kind of recruited a little bit in it. We saw more in Illinois here as of late, certainly with Trey Taylor, and before that, Claude and Puma, and just the effort in that state. We know that they have spent some time recruiting in Minnesota and Wisconsin and Iowa as well, but certainly not as much with kind of like maybe Ohio and Indiana as we saw with Bo Pelini or Mike Riley. They are spending time in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, famously Big Ten states with Rutgers and Penn State as well, and Maryland. They've spent some time in the Chesapeake region. But what is just kind of your thoughts on this, though? Because this is kind of a thing that, you know, I think people have sort of asked about before, but they don't put a ton of resources in sort of the heart of Big Ten country.
Yeah, I don't think there's a correlation, at least at this point. I think there was at one point, but we both know. I mean, like, this staff is invested in getting into Chicago and getting into, the Northeast, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, and especially more recently, talking about the Northeast. I think James Franklin moving down to Virginia Tech has opened up that area, at least for like a few programs that now believe they can kind of start to build something of a presence up there. And Nebraska is among those programs trying to do that. Chicago, they're really trying. I mean, their efforts here in this 27 class. I mean, it's going to have to be getting some of these Chicago guys. You want to come from behind and land it to Tavares Harrington. You want to be involved in with a David Fuller-Runshoe. You want to be involved with the David Hill along the defensive line. At a linebacker, they've got a few options too. So they're trying in Chicago. I think their effort's been there. They're really trying in the Northeast. I think you're going to start to see them with the relationships that Roy Manning and Corey Brown have. You saw them in Kentucky and kind of that like northern Kentucky and in that part of the country, which is kind of between Big Ten and SEC country. A little bit of ACC in there too. I mean, they're trying in the DMV, so they're trying. I don't think it's a lack of effort necessarily. I would say I think there's a correlation between their lack of success and maybe their lack of success in Big Ten country, like on-field success and the lack of recruiting success. Because these are the guys around here that watch this program. I mean, we're potentially about to see it here again with Cooper Terwilliger, a four-star tight end from South Dakota, you know, grew up watching Nebraska football, liking Nebraska football, and he's one that's had a top four of Nebraska, Iowa State, and Michigan. Iowa State's been essentially just straight up replaced by Penn State in that recruitment, and that Penn State that formerly Iowa State staff just picked up where they left off, now recruiting him to a Big Ten school, and now he's trending that way. A guy that watched Nebraska football a whole lot for years, and I think for him, it's an opportunity to be part of a staff that he's seen a little more development from in recent years, and a staff that he's developed a really good relationship. The one edge Nebraska had over Iowa State and that Matt Campbell staff for a while was, hey, you get to play in the Big Ten versus the Big 12. Now they don't have that advantage anymore, and you're seeing how that recruitment's going. So, yeah, I think there's a correlation in terms of the lack of success. I don't think it's a Nebraska has not invested because they haven't had success. They're trying, and they've they still do resonate with guys in the region. But I mean, part of it is like it's the development, and it's the how do you stack up against the guys around you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too. I think we overthink, where Nebraska should go get players and everything else. It's not so much the location. It's, will this guy fit what you're trying to do? And can you put him on a development track to sort of get the most out of him? And sometimes that's the case with guys around here. And sometimes, like we saw here recently, Nebraska might look at what's in state and think, hey, good player, but we might need something else, and choose to go somewhere else to sort of find that. So I think what's been interesting, Tim, is initially it felt like there was going to be this big push and they were going to take a ton of guys out of Texas, and they're still going to take some players from there. But they very much feel like they're kind of just wherever there's someone that interests them on their board, they're willing to go there. It's not like there's we got to get 6 guys out of Florida and 3 guys out of Georgia and 5 guys out of Texas and 3 kids locally, and we'll call it a class. Like I just don't. There's no quotas or anything to this.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I mean, I do think we've talked about this on this show in the past of like, hey, they're some of the lands and success they've had with South Florida guys has allowed them to establish a bit of a presence where they are a name when they go and offer a guy down there. It makes waves. They're trying to do that same thing in the Carolinas, in Chicago, and so there's some obviously like hotbed areas and areas they want to have an established presence in. Based on relationships they have on staff, based on some areas they believe are worth investing in. But yeah, it's like you mentioned. I don't think there's like there's no like I don't know. I don't know what the term is to even describe it. Like I mean, it's not even like Kansas City, for example. They may land like 1 guy from Kansas City this cycle. They could land up to 3, but it's likely just going to be like a guy or 2. So it's not like they're going into even in these like regional kind of hotbeds. It's not like they're going there like, oh, we need 5 guys from Kansas City. We need, whatever from Missouri in general. Like that. I don't think that's how they view it. And it's good that I honestly think it's good. And I think with some of the guys they have on staff, I think specifically Addison Williams, Dikeel Shorts, early on, Roy Manning, what we've seen from him, early on, what we've seen from Jeep Wade. These are guys willing to travel and go kind of wherever to go land or recruit. Like I don't think any of those guys have a specific region they're more comfortable with than another. I mean, Dikeel has receivers in the Northeast, up in his like hometown or home state of New Jersey, and he's got receiver targets down in like Florida, and he's perfectly comfortable going up and down the coast. He's perfectly comfortable going to the West Coast and landing guys. I think same thing for Addison Williams, like literally like has a bunch of South Florida DBs he's after, and then also has a bunch of guys on the other side of the coast he's after. So I don't think there's a region this staff is not. I mean, we saw it last year with Braden too, like to try and get Valenson, they went internationally, this is a staff I think is willing to go wherever. And it's a give and take. You would like to have like a consistent, like, hey, we can consistently go to this area and land talent. You want to have those places. But when you're a school like Nebraska in the position they're in, it takes time to develop those things. So they're trying, but until you get to that point where it's like, okay, well, until they get a couple of years down the line, it's like, okay, well, these guys from Chicago went to Nebraska and had success. Then you become more of a name in Chicago.
Right.
Yeah. So it just takes time.
Yeah, and so much of it is just having that guy from the area have success. It makes it easier to want to be the next guy from that area to go play there. And I feel like we've been talking about this forever. When it was 2013 and 14, it was, what can happen with Johnny Stanton and Terrell Newby to help Nebraska out in Los Angeles. And turns out not a lot happened with those guys. And so you're still searching for your next answers out in Los Angeles or St. Louis or whatever the regions are where you try to pull players.
Yeah, I mean, I
a
will
lot
say,
of it
like,
is just
I
go
would say
stack talent
go ahead.
and have success, and the chips fall where they fall.
Right. But, like, I mean, with Los Angeles in particular, like, I think Sierra and the success he had at Nebraska is for sure about the
Absolutely.
impact. Like, there's a reason they're in it for some of these Southern California DBs, and they're giving them a lot to think about. Part of it is the play of Sierra Wright and kind of his impact, like his energy around the program last year.
Would Andrew Marshall kind of be a part of that too? Because he's from out
Yeah,
there,
and
right?
that's when you start to build that up a little bit. I mean, it's not true. It's more like Inland Empire. Both him and Owen Chambliss are more like Inland Empire guys. So, but that's another area. You want to have a presence in. You really want to have like an
There's
established.
good football out there for
Yeah.
sure.
So you want to have an established presence. So yeah, I mean, you had Sierra, now you kind of have an opportunity to strengthen that with a Marshall and then you go in with the Chambliss as well. And yeah, if those two guys turn around and be like draft picks or something, the Cali guys will start to pay attention.
Yeah, and it's always it's always interesting how these things sort of shake out as you look at the class at the end of it. And then in the portal era, I just feel like the proximity thing means even less in some ways because guys are just going to leave. I mean, enough guys from in-state have left for opportunities elsewhere. Guys have stuck around that are from further away. Guys from further away have come to Nebraska through the portal. Guys that are from Nebraska that have come back from other places. So I think it's just sort of the portal has become a great equalizer in all of that. But all right, I want to spend the bulk of this show today kind of just going through some spring football stuff. Matt Rhule got up and spoke today. He kind of ran through a list of players that are not going to be available this spring. And so we'll start there and we'll go through these. Some of these are very obvious because we watched them get hurt. Some of these, it's a little disappointing because it feels like they're never available in the spring, and it makes it hard to kind of understand or see, where the next step is for them, as players or how this can kind of move forward. And so here's a list. Wide receiver Demetrius Bell, wide receiver tight end Janiran Bonner. You have offensive lineman Nolan Fennessy, safety Rex Guthrie, offensive lineman Gunnar Gatula, defensive back Bly Hill, punter Camden Cook, edge Mac Markway, tight end Carter Nelson, offensive lineman Gibson Pyle, offensive lineman Juju Marks, linebacker Dawson Merritt, linebacker Gage Stenger. And then there's a few guys that they're kind of waiting to be cleared. I think most notably in this group, and feel free to correct me if you disagree with this, but out of the four names that are here on Inside Nebraska, you can find this. You have Tyson Terry, you have Jake Peters, you have Connor Keneally, and you have Trent Euler. It for me is Tyson Terry. That guy. I want to see him, have as much runway as possible. Because I'll be honest, Tim, I don't know what he can give you, but if there's one thing I'm not worried about, it's Tyson being outworked. And so I just want that guy to have an opportunity to get on the field. If it's 5 snaps a game, 15 snaps a game, all the snaps in the game, whatever it is. I just, I know enough about Tyson Terry that I'm comfortable that if he's getting some playing time, he's earned his way to it, and it's not going to be wasted.
Yeah, whatever snaps you're getting out of him, it's high effort snaps. Like it's
right.
It's high motor, high energy. So, yeah, absolutely think he's that guy. Of this group, honestly, like I think of the group that's missing spring that I think is the most impactful. I think it's Bonner, just because of what he would mean to the offense and kind of it's less of what he would mean, and I think more of like, okay, the way they talk about Sorensen, and what I think Sorensen's skill set is, they can be almost interchangeable. Does that potentially allow for Sorensen to get maybe a bit of a head start or a jump start this spring, because I think those two guys in particular can be interchangeable. And in based on what we heard from Dana today, based on how I kind of envision these two guys, what those roles would look like, I think those two can be interchangeable. And I wonder a little bit if, like, okay, Bonner, and that would be a good problem to have if Nebraska's like, okay, well, who do we put on the field? Do we put Bonner? Do we put Sorensen? We kind of have to pick. And, unfortunately, it may just be and this happens, but injuries kind of lead to guys getting jumped in the depth. I mean, same thing goes for Carter Nelson. He's probably going to get jumped here by Luke Sorensen on the depth chart just off the result of missing spring.
Yeah, I mean, Carter Nelson's one of those guys where it's like, I wish that he was able to give you the full spring. It feels like We just haven't seen him
He hasn't had
kinda
a
at
full,
full
like,
strength.
a
Yeah.
year just to develop like, a true year, and
It
I'm hoping we get that at some point because yeah.
it's almost Fedoni-esque where it's like, "Man, can we just get, like, a 12-month period where you get to just work and work towards being the best football player you can be, and there's not these start and stop periods?" He's not the only one. I mean, I don't know what exactly Gunnar Gatula's role is with the offensive lineman that they brought in. I mean, he's one of those guys that I think has a lot of value and that he can play guard, he can play tackle, but that's someone else who missed all of last spring, and I think it hurt him. You know,
Yeah.
he was playing early in his career, and then you want to see him build off of it. He has off-season surgery last year. He misses all of spring, comes back, and it's not like he was bad, but he wasn't he at times he certainly wasn't one of your best five. Now it's you've got these other guys being brought in from the transfer portal and Paul Mabenga and Brendan Black and Tree Babalade, and they're going to take spots. But if you're going to Gatula, you want to be in the mix for whether you're fighting for a tackle job or you're fighting for an interior offensive line spot. It just you hope it's not a wasted year or that he gets too far behind or anything like that because he's going to have value. You need more than 5 linemen, whoever your top 5 are going to be. And so Gunnar Gatula very well could be the next best lineman that you have. And so you'd like to have him available. And then we knew he was hurt from the bowl, but Dawson Merritt, I mean, another guy where you didn't have him last spring, would have loved to have gotten a full runway with him in this defensive system. And so, just kind of some lamenting there, but that's sort of your housekeeping stuff. Let's just kind of dive into it. What's the biggest takeaway you had from Matt Rhule listening to him today?
I think the comment, and I've had this discussion, and I thought the comment on the portal retention, all of that was very in between his thoughts and Stewart's thoughts last night of like, okay, yeah, like Nebraska has money more than they had before, but the thing goes up when Rule said what he said in October of, we have the money now, we can't complain. It's like, well, yeah, you have the money needed to compete in like last year's cycle, but this year's cycle, the money goes up everywhere else. So Nebraska had enough to compete, and are plenty fine. But yeah, like you mentioned, it's just got to kind of keep leveling up. As even if people are receptive to that or not, that's just the state of where things are at right now. Is that's kind of unfortunate. So the money has to keep going up in order to keep retaining the roster. But I thought I'm very interested in the defense. I'm pretty bullish. Think based on hearing Rule talk about it and listening to Orich today. I mean, one, I just generally believe in more of like the 4-2-5 system where you are kind of playing. You have active run fitters. You were playing some of this cover 7 man match stuff that obviously Saban's doing, but McDonald and Minter, who Orich mentioned today, are also running and more modernizing. And so I'm really just excited to get into it. And I think it's really encouraging that Ulrich got the freedom to bring in his guys at all 3 levels. He has brought in his edge rushers coach with him. He plucked a guy that's familiar with his defensive line coach. He's obviously a linebackers guy himself, so he's going to help that level. And then he brought in a safeties coach in Tyler Yelk that it knows his system and has had some experience in the NFL and comes to this program. Learning from another guy who I don't know. I'm sure Josh obviously did, but the new Cowboys DC, it came from Philly, and I was pretty struck by listening to him. I think he's another guy that I'm pretty excited about as a young kind of defensive mind, and I think it's encouraging that Yelk's been learning from that. You're learning from that guy. So my biggest takeaway in general is just about the defense and what they want this team to be moving forward. You can tell they want to be more physical, more true, like Big Ten-esque kind of in how they play on both sides of the line of scrimmage and just how they play in general. And then just tenor. I mean, I was waiting to see. I mean, I kind of told Steve, I was like, I wonder if we're going to get a more cagey Rule this spring, or just more cagey coaching staff. I didn't get that really at all from listening to all of them. Like
Sounded like he was very dialed back.
Dialed back for sure, but I don't think it was like he was open to the questions people were asking. Like it wasn't like it wasn't always like canned, maybe to the way I expected it to be. So I kind of appreciated the candor, even if it was obviously like dialed back a little bit.
Yeah. I wanted to you're going into the defense there, and one of the things that always sort of fascinates me, and it's been a big topic of conversation around here for several years now. Do you and I'm curious where you come from with it. How much do you care about like when Nebraska says they're going to be a 4-3 or a 4-2-5 or a 3-3-5? Like, do you put a lot of stock in like what that first number is with the down defensive lineman? Because it just feels like no matter what they say, so much of it's going to be based on the opponent that you play, the situation that you're in, and every team in college football, regardless of what their scheme is, needs and wants to be as multiple as possible
Yeah.
because you have to match up with college football. Like
Yeah.
part of what makes this sport great is that what you face one week is going to be wildly different than what you face the next.
Yeah, though I'm more interested in just the general philosophy and some of the like the philosophical changes this
Yes.
like okay, like hey, up front, like I was just kind of DMing with Mike Rosivy a little bit about it, but like yeah, they're going to play more gap and a half up front versus they're not just solely gap shooting anymore. They're not going to be two gapping. They are playing more modern in terms of how they're going to fit up front and what they're going to ask for the linebackers, how they're going to ask them to flow and fit and things like that. But yeah, like I mean, what like Orich just straight up said it. He's like, hey, we're gonna play 4 down with the stand up edge to the boundary, weak side end. That is what Nebraska has been doing. Like they have had that essentially, but it's been called a 3-3-5.
Right.
That guy's moved around a little bit, and obviously, again, philosophically, it's gonna look a little different. They're not gonna run the same like core principles of like, okay, we're lining like for Orich, it's always going to be the weak side end is going to line up to the boundary. That wasn't necessarily the case under Tony and John Butler in what they were running. On the back end, yeah, they're going to be running more quarters. You're going to see more man. You're going to see some of that like man match, and so it's going to be different in that sense. But like even that, like they were running quarters last year. This is going to be, I think, more true man match than what we maybe saw last year or what they were trying to do last year. At least trying to hone that in. So you're going to have guys that cover. But yeah, I thought it was really silly that people were like, oh, they're going from a 3 down to a 4 down. But they were always playing a 4. They were a 4 down last year. They were 4 down the year before pretty much. And you're going to be multiple enough. Like, I mean, Orge even mentioned it, like their true base is going to be 4-2-5, but the real base is 4-3. It's still 4-3. But you're never going to be actually running your true. Like, I always hate when people do that now, even in the NFL, because they call like, oh, he's a base 3-4 guy. You're never going to have 4. Like, no, it's going to be base 3-3 or base 4-2. It's never going to be, you're always going to have a nickel on the field more often than not at this point because everyone plays with 5 DBs.
Right. That's sort of the kind of thing that cracks me up on it is that, and it's the same. It's no different than when I was covering recruiting, and you would hear like these sort of terms, or just the people really want to put things in boxes, and it's like it's never that neat. It's never that tidy. Like we love labels. We'd love to be able to say a guy's a pocket passer versus a dual threat versus an all-purpose running back versus a speed back versus a physical wide receiver and a route runner and a speed threat and a deep threat. Like we love labels.
Yeah, and like people are going to say this, and then the thing about playing out of a base, regardless, but the good defenses now, like the really good defenses now, are able to fit the run out of lighter boxes. And for Nebraska, who's going to be split safety, you're going to be light in the box a lot, and you're going to see people complaining about it again in the fall. And it's like, well, you got what you wanted. They're playing a 4 down. I mean, I saw people on. I just like opened my phone again. I saw like fans on there being like, we're celebrating the death of the 3-3-5, and we're finally back.
No, I know that's. I knew what I was doing when I teed this up. For
you. they were running it last year, so I like that's some of the stuff where I'm yeah, it's going to look different, and I'm excited about the what this defense will look like as this group of new coordinator and his assistants kind of dive in with the players on it. But yeah, like I mean, philosophic or like literally from what it's going to look. I think visually for a lot of people, it's going to look maybe pre-snap a little more static than they've seen before, and a lot more familiar than maybe you realize.
Yeah, I think, and this is what happened when Tony White first got here. I think there's just this weird, like, oh, they're reinventing the wheel every time that there's a different sort of quote unquote defensive philosophy. And it's really a lot more simple and also complex than that, if that makes sense. Like, ultimately, what they're trying to do is always the same thing, regardless of how it's lined up. They're just maybe doing a little bit different with a piece here or there, depending on the matchup or depending on how many extra they want in a box or whatever else. All of that to say, I knew what was going to happen when I saw some of these quotes, and I anticipate people to basically think that they're just going to run like the bear defense now and have all of these down linemen and everything else, and it's not that. It's definitely not going to be that. All right, so what else from Matt Rhule today? I mean, I know he talked a little about Dana Holgorsen. I think the $1 million question for Nebraska football has almost less to do with its defense, and again comes back to the offense. We're now in the second full year, the sort of second and a half year of Dana Holgorsen. What, given what Matt Rhule said, where he has this freedom to do whatever he wants, do we have any feel for what that actually looks like in a post Dylan Raiola world with Anthony Calandria now at quarterback?
I think because he said that Rule said that of like having more freedom, and then you mentioned that, and then you listen to Dana, and Dana's like, look, we don't know what we're going to be until like deep in the spring or into the fall. Like it's based on what we're good at. I think he noted he talked about the transition at West Virginia from either 2013 to 14 or 14 to 15 when Skylar Howard took over, and he was like, he was a guy who was mobile and could throw deep, and I was like, who's that sound like? It sounds like Anthony Calandria. So I wonder if it's a little more of getting back to some of that. My comment, like, what do I think Nebraska's offense will look like? It's going to be. I mean, there's going to be a lot. I think there's going to be you're going to take some run game principles from Georgia Tech, what they were doing. I mean, based on what, like talking to recruits that have watched film with Jeep Wade and based on what we know about Jeep Wade, like we're going to see, I mean, they're going to run outside zone. They're going to still run duo. They're going to run some of the stuff they have before, but a lot of outside zone, a lot of that on the run side of things. QB run. I mean, Dana mentioned it. You're not going to be running Anthony Calandria like 15 times scripted, like not scripted or like, designed runs 15 times a game. And then I also think this offense, I think, is going to, it may not live in it, but a lot of this offense is going to be off script. It's a lot of like when stuff breaks down, like me and Severe joking about it, or Severe's joking about it on Twitter. But I just the quote of having the ability to make things happen off schedule is very refreshing. And Severe responds like, AKA, it doesn't really matter what I call. Which is like, yeah, once the things break down, it's like, okay, Anthony, go make something happen. Like, the pocket breaks down, he's extending on the run, whatever that looks like. And that's why I also thought his focus on, hey, we have 3 veteran receivers in Isaiah, Ja'Cory, and Quasi. When stuff goes off script, the success and how you're able to, and the ultimate success of those plays is based on the quarterback and the receiver's ability to react to each other. It's okay, I'm rolling out right. You're running a outbreaking route. Can you work back to me? Can you work back to me in some way? And so, yeah, like people want some of these young receivers to step up. It's the veteran guys that are better at that have had to do that for some time now. With some of them gotten used to it with Dylan. Quasi's gotten used to it with Nico because Nico does some of that. And so I thought all of that was really interesting. But yeah, I think in terms of what this offense is going to look like, I still think that's going to be something Dana might not even know come like the spring game,
Yeah, well, and he may not know until Ohio.
Yeah.
Until you really see what somebody else wants to try to do to you defensively for you to figure out what it is that you want to do to them, the other way around. So that is certainly something to keep an eye on. Jumping around here, other comments that kind of stood out to me from Matt Rhule. There is this is something that I think we could have a decent small size sort of discussion on. And it was around the time that he talked about the money and what they had, for the portal and how that was good enough for what it was previously. But as they've ascended, others have ascended too. He also said this, and this is something that I think even as fans kind of get accustomed to new faces swapping in and out every year, we're now like 4 or 5 years into this, and it feels like coaches probably have a good plan for how they're going to get players adjusted and acclimated as they come in. Players have transferred a couple times now, so it's not as unusual for them to sort of get used to it. Do you think there is less of a sort of overall learning curve for teams now as we've gotten deeper into the portal era, and you're sort of like used to this whole thing by now. Like none of it takes you by surprise, because having new teammates that you didn't play with, that come from somewhere else, that then have to assimilate, or you sort of get used to them. This is just what it is now in college football.
Yeah, I think so. That's a good point. I mean, like, I mean, you mentioned Pritchett and just how like Pritchett kind of opened up around Pop, but like for Pritchett, this is nothing. Like, it's a new team. He's transferred once before. He's getting used to a whole new group of guys he's going to be playing with along the offensive line. It would make some sense for him to take kind of an active role in it, but also kind of see this as like a normal. Yeah, I mean, you look around the roster, like, I mean, within the quarterback room, you have multiple transfers just in that room alone. Within the tight end room, you've had some guys that, and Mac Markway, who is formerly Mike Markway in the tight end room, who was transferred before. You've got guys across the roster, I think, that have. And I also think, based on how the staff has developed culture and try to develop culture and develop culture. Yeah, like I think every spring it is kind of like through winter workouts and through some of the stuff like mat drills and things that they do, it is almost like a reacclimation to the new guy or whatever that looks like, and it's like a fresh slate. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, like treating each offseason almost like a fresh slate and building up a new team versus building from one to the other. But like I know there were rosters that used to do it before the NIL era, where like it's like, hey, whatever we did last year, we flush it. We're a brand new team. Like there are teams that talked about that before. Now I think it's more so you kind of do really feel that, where nothing you did last year matters. This is a new team. It's a new opportunity. It can be a good and a bad thing, for Nebraska, it's like, okay, for some of these guys, it's like flush last year. Hell yeah. Like I'm excited about it. Like, let's flush last year. But at the same time, you also want to be able to build off what you did last year, not fully dismiss any of that. But it is very difficult when you're replacing a quarterback and shifting shifting schemes, like it's tough to build off what you did last year. It's kind of like it is kind of like a whole new deal.
You mentioned earlier that you were excited that they gave Rob Orich the freedom to kind of bring in who he wanted at different positions, or to have the different coaches available to him. Who do you think the most important sort of lieutenant is amongst those coaches that have now joined this staff, that it's going to be pretty valuable for them to have this person as he tries to enact that vision?
Before the press conference, I would have said Corey. Coming out of the press conference and just listening to Orich talk about Roy Manning and like his trust in Manning's, specifically his ability to get guys to, like he talked about, like figuring out that final, like getting through, and then it's like the top of the arc, point of attack, like whatever you want to call it, that top of the rush, getting through and then closing on the quarterback. That is what most guys struggle with. Like Williams and Bernard, when like that is the one thing that I think he could get better at. Like when we talked about Princewell his last season here, that was a step he needed to take. Was, okay, you're right there. How do you get there faster? Or how do you close faster? Or how do you how do you fully bend? Like how do you get through that? I think it's very interesting that Orich sees Manning as a guy that's really good at unlocking that and getting guys to that. And like, I don't think we're at the point. I don't think his resume is to the point where we have like pass rush whisperer just yet, but like if he can be something like that, where okay, yeah, you can unlock a Williams who is like your like top of the line pass rusher, like you want that guy to be unlocked. But further down the list, like, okay, but what does a Willis McGahee look like here? What does they mentioned Vincent Genatone? What does a Vincent Genatone look like potentially as like that potential big linebacker in the nickel who would pass rush at times? Like I imagine Manning's going to be working not just with his true edge rushes, but the linebackers they send on blitzes, the nickel they send on blitzes, like the corner when they like working on developing a pass rush plan with those guys. And if Orich's faith into him is warranted, that could mean a whole lot for this defense and what they can do moving forward on the recruiting trail as well.
Yeah, I think that second part is really big too, because you obviously want to take advantage of his success as a recruiter. He's going to be going after high end pass rushers, and maybe you're not going to be able to show it right on the front side here because they don't play until September, and you're going to get some commitments before that. But whether it be for the portal or for the 2027, 2028 classes, whichever, if he could show early, like if Williams Nwaneri can take a step early, if Willis McGahee can take that next step and be a contributor, if you can get something more out of these pass rush guys that you already have on the roster, like I just think that's the sort of thing that you'd be able to show to recruits, show to portal guys, and it would make Nebraska a more appealing place for some of these pass rushers. Like I think, as we were talking about having the success to get somebody from your area, part of like why Nebraska doesn't seem to recruit really high or do really well with pass rushers is haven't had a lot that you can sort of point to is like, yeah, you come to Nebraska, they're going to be able to do this for you. I mean, it just doesn't, it really hasn't happened. You've got guys like Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker that are just brute strength, but they haven't had like a lot of just slippery edge rush guys or guys that can get home, through a variety of moves. It's kind of just been almost the holy grail for Nebraska's defensive line is to find natural pass rushers. And I know that's like difficult throughout college football, but it just seems like in Nebraska, it's been even more problematic.
Yeah, because I mean, in other places you can, it's just tough to find the combination of traits needed to be that natural pass rusher. That's just like in your backyard.
There's not a lot in the area, so you have to go out and get them from somewhere else.
Yeah, and like every cycle, like the guys now, the guys that like start to flash those kind of. I mean, like Luke Waffles like ascended up the ranks when it was like, oh, this guy just knows how to get after the quarterback, and ended up probably being one of, if not the highest paid player in the cycle. And I think he ended up like the number one edge for sure, but like maybe the top recruit, I think in the last On3 ranking at least. So that's a guy like, every cycle, I think there's very few of those like natural pass rushers out there. And yeah, those are like the 4 or 5 star guys. And those guys will want to go where the pass rush production is, where like, that's the thing. Like, we mentioned it in the portal. Nebraska like didn't strike out in the defensive line portal, in the portal along the defensive line for lack of resources. They were the highest bidder for some guys. If you start to show some like improvement and show some like, oh, we have a plan here. Like we will develop you as a pass rusher. Guys are going to be more open to like listening to what Nebraska has to say. And like, like you mentioned, it would have to come early with Nwaneri for it to like have an impact in high school recruiting, because the majority of this class will probably be in the boat come August, September. Right. But it'll be key in like trying to flip maybe someone like a KJ Green late, or trying to get back into that type of recruitment late. And it'll be huge in the portal, like just having a really good year, and what that can do for you in the portal. I mean, we just saw it like last year. Texas Tech went and spent a bunch of money on the D line with some production, but not like the level that we saw this last year. And now they were able to go into the portal and say like, hey, we're getting you at a discount. We don't have to be the highest bidder anymore in these guys, because they want to come here and they want to develop in our defense.
Yep. Let's finish up with this. Pat Stewart, Nebraska's general manager, was on Husker Sports Nightly talking with Kyle Crooks, kind of about a variety of topics. I'm sure you listened to this, or at least have read up on what Pat Stewart was sort of saying. I am curious, like, what did you kind of make of that conversation? And, what did you have any sort of key takeaways of that chat between Kyle Crooks and Pat Stewart? He hasn't had a lot of media appearances. I think he's one of those people where it's always a question to me of like, what is the actual role that he is doing? And how much of it is sort of management of other people? How much of it is management of the finances? Is he sort of stumping on behalf of any individual players? Sort of a lot of questions in there, but just what do you think of kind of the interview itself, but also just what do you think of what Pat Stewart's actual role is with this program?
Yeah, at this point, it feels like a lot of it. I think there's going to be something of a, not alignment, probably not the word, but like a structuring of sort where like, everything does right now. I feel that a lot of the finances just kind of fall under Pat. Yep. I think within the building, a lot of the other operations fall under him. Like, I mean, he talked about the pivot from Minchie to Calandry and what that looked like, and on our back end, we put up a behind the scenes on how that kind of went down. There was disagreement within the building on like who should be the guy, we knew there were multiple higher ups, however you want to look at it, multiple higher ups that saw Minchie as number one. But there were people in the building, and I don't know the extent of how many, but I do know there were multiple that believe Calandria should have been their top target. And they were helped by the fact that when Calandria entered the portal, he wanted to be at Nebraska. Like, he entered with the idea that, okay, well, I'm entering to go to Nebraska, and see what else is out there, just based on some like early, whatever. But I, knowing that and knowing how it played out, it was like, okay, well, Pat's role in that was like helping Nebraska navigate that and essentially getting through the finish line with Calandria and getting that set up. But like, it was an open deal. It was Pat who had the final say on like, yep, this is the guy. Like, that still went around. So right now the role feels like very much something that is like, at this point coming out of the portal, is very much managing the finances and some of that. Like, they talked about the running back position. Like, I knew there were people on staff in the portal that were assessing the running back market, but there was someone higher up that was like, we're not going to be spending above this much. If you're going to find a running back, it has to be under this, if that. And ultimately they were just like, we're not going to spend there. We feel good about the room based on what they were spending on the guys in the room and what they saw out there. And so that leads me to believe, okay, well, in certain positions or certain things, it's like, okay, well, he can put his foot down and say, well, from a financial standpoint, we're not going to do this. From a financial standpoint, we're not going to do this. And like, so I right now it feels like a lot of the role is just managing the money, which is helpful. That's really helpful because it takes a lot of that off of other people in this kind of NIL. You need someone that can do that kind of stuff. But that said, I think moving forward, based on that conversation and based on just my feel on what's going on in the building, was like, yeah, I think it does need to kind of come under him where like, okay, he is kind of leading these, like he is kind of the nucleus and the central focus of the
center point person,
the center point person. Because right now that center point person feels like Keith Williams still.
Yep. And it's that's where figuring out your structure and how you want to operate is so valuable, because it all has to emanate from somewhere. And when you have two different types of player procurement, and you're talking about trying to go get a high school guy and trying to get portal guys, and then lining up the NIL for each and making sure you have enough money for what it is you want to do, there's just a lot with it. Like, this is a very different era of college football recruiting. And so it fascinates me kind of how Nebraska has it structured. And I think there's still a lot we don't fully understand or fully know. But one of the things that he was discussing is how they clearly wanted to go get offensive linemen, and they wanted guys that were going to be able to play right away. They wanted guys that sort of fit what Jeep Wade wanted. And I thought, and Matt Rhule talked about this too, and this sort of goes off of something that you said on, if we've had like, this might be episode number 7 or number 8, but if we've had 7 or 8 episodes, you probably said this 5 or 6 times. Jeep Wade's value as a recruiter cannot be under discussed at this point. It sure seems like you don't end up with a guy like Paul Mabenga or maybe some of these other linemen without Jeep Wade. And Pat Stewart kind of said that again in that Sports Nightly interview.
Yeah, he said that, and then they again in the press conference today just kind of told the story of like it was his, or Dana told the story about like it was Jeep's effort that got them across the finish line with Paul Mabenga. So yeah, it's been one of those things that like I've just been pleasantly surprised by, and like every week we just built out the O-line and offense tackle and interior O-line board, and talking to these guys and getting a feel for like, okay, well, what interests you about Nebraska? Why, think about guys like Jackson Roper and Gus Corsair that visited Nebraska before, that left without an offer, even though Oklahoma was in the mix and like other regional programs were in the mix. And I'm sure they felt burned by that at some point. But you talk to them now about Nebraska, and it's like, oh, I can't wait to get back out there. I'm really excited about like Jeep does something where it's like, okay, there's no hard feelings. And like, I think there's a general understanding of like, look, this is a new staff, a new offensive line staff. This is the new vision and all of that. So that obviously helps smooth things over, but just there's something about him that every O-lineman I've talked to has been really excited about getting around him and getting to be coached by him. And how much of it is what he's done? How much of it is, I kind of underestimated how much offensive linemen across the country had just been watching Georgia Tech tape for a while now.
That's part of it, is like Georgia Tech is not like this name brand thing. And yet it feels like he's getting a big runway from these 2 years where they were just a mauling offensive line and Hayes King was doing some things.
Yeah. Like it's so yeah. Like I think part of it's that it's just kind of underestimating. Like I mean, you talk to the linemen they're recruiting down in the South that have been around that program. They love like what they saw from Georgia Tech. I was talking to like Barrett Cottrell after his junior day and Timmy Aliu. They were like both of them mentioned almost verbatim. They're like, he really lets his offensive line run. Like we got in the film room, it was like I'm really excited about the fact that he lets his guys like run. Like they run outside zone and they're going to be moving and in space and like yeah, the big boys want to move, and this excites them.
We'll finish up with this. Give me a couple players that you are hoping to hear more about this spring. Could be new additions, could be holdovers, could be at a premium position, could just be because they're on like a list of people you're just more interested in than everybody else. But like, who are you kind of hoping to hear more about this spring? Because I think in the absence of having any opponent, or we're just not going to learn a ton. But there are things you can absolutely learn, and there are players that it's better if you feel like the staff is talking about them and they're not just being brought up because we're asking the questions.
Yeah, I know what Nebraska. I feel like I know what Nebraska has in the running back room in Mackay and Quentin Ives in particular. I want to hear more about where Mosey kind of fits into that, what that role ultimately looks like, how he's going to fit in the offensive line room. Like I'm looking for. I don't think it's a name necessarily, but with Gatula out in particular, like does anyone else step up to be that sixth off the bench guy? I think a name I would point to would be Preston Tamua.
Yeah.
Probably, but like waiting to see, maybe this is the spring Grant Bricks finally, takes that step forward or something, or really takes a sizable step forward. Receiver room, take your pick between Jeremiah Jones and Cortez Mills. I'm waiting for one of those guys to kind of take another step forward on the defensive side of the ball. Beyond like again, you want. I mean, I would say along the defensive line, I'm hoping for health with Owen Studemeyer, but I think I'm waiting to hear what they think about Jasir Whittington and what he can be as like the 3 tech. And then second level Foster. I'm really fascinated by Foster, what he can be, because I mean Chambliss is going to be your kind of probably the green dot, like calling the defense, leading the unit, whatever. I can see a world where Foster is the longer run better player. And so I'm really interested by him. And then the secondary, like man, honestly, like I mean, it's just there's a bunch of names in there, but like I'm waiting to hear about where I know what Shiggs is. I think I know what obviously McDougal is. Where does Vic Evans fit in? Where does a Larry Tarver fit in? Because they brought him back for a reason. They brought Braylon Prude back for a reason. Is Braylon ready, or is it going to be just another year of special teams play and continuing to develop for a longer burn? But like Tarver more than him, and even Amari Sanders. I like this is going to be a do or die kind of spring for some of these guys. Where okay, yeah, there's not a spring portal necessarily, but a poor spring and following that up with like okay, well maybe some of these guys might be so buried on the depth chart they don't even get that chance in fall, could lead to some of these guys we've been maybe waiting to see for 2-3 years hitting the portal next offseason. Because yeah, you're going to have Danny Odom coming in and taking jobs. You're going to have Shiggs coming in and trying to take some jobs. Evans in the same way. McDougal's obviously going to have a starting job. So there's a lot of playing time to be had, a lot of snaps to be split. I'm trying to figure out who the odd man out ultimately become.
Yeah. No, that's the secondary. It's always fascinating because it just feels like there's way more names and spots every year, and you keep thinking that number will go down, and they just keep adding more. And at some point, we'll see sort of who emerges there in particular. All right, that was the bulk of what we have here today. We have a comment from Theo earlier who wants everyone should vote for Unemployed in Severe's media bracket. Michael Severe has a media bracket every year. It is sometimes hilariously controversial. It sometimes leads to some squabbles on social media. And this year he has a podcast bracket, as we thank Theo for imploring people to vote for Unemployed. You can vote for Unemployed if you want. Don't feel like you have to. There's lots of great podcasts out there. The I-80 stuff is out there. Volleyball State's a great podcast. Give them your support. The Coffee Hour, they're going to be out there as well. There's lots of good podcasts. Tim's Tim's friends over at Inside Nebraska, they do podcasts as well. We support the podcast, and so be sure to check out Michael Severe's Twitter
Podcast
page.
as a medium.
Yes.
You get a hat with just podcasts on it.
Yeah.
Like.
We should just get a hat that says casts, since nobody uses a full word for anything, or pods. Or I could wear pod and you could have casts, and you could just read across the screen like that. I like that. That could be good. So be sure to just find Michael Severe's Twitter page and participate in this, and then just watch as things play out. But I appreciate the shout out from Theo there and everybody else. We will be back on Friday. It'll be a feedback Friday. Jack Mitchell, he still probably isn't that over that game against Iowa. We'll dive into a little more Nebraska football now that we have some commentary from some of these guys, and I'll get his thoughts on some things. We'll see where he's at with Nebraska basketball and the doomsday meter and all of that's out there. I'll see kind of how he thinks things could finish up. And of course, we'll have a blind rankings that's just specifically for Jack that'll take 30 minutes because no one needs more time to rank things than Jack Mitchell. Tim, as always, appreciate you here on a Building Blocks Thursday. Everybody, thanks for checking this out. If you're on the stream, if you're listening on the podcast, be sure to check out what we have going on with the I-80 Club. Hit them up on Patreon, become a member, join the Discord, join the conversation, all of that and more. We'll see you on Friday.